Church devotional series where we go through the entire Bible in 20 months. And we do that by reading 2 chapters a day. And today's chapters are chapters 16 and 17 of Genesis. And this is the story of Abraham, his wife, and his wife's servant. And one of the big issues here is they're wrestling with the delay between the promise of God and the fulfillment of that promise. I remember when you were little as a child and you were told, tomorrow someone's coming to visit, or next week we're going to go to the park, or on your birthday, which happened to be like 2 weeks away, you're going to get that gift. The agony of the wait between the promise and the fulfillment. We remember that as a child. And the same applies to us in our spiritual walk, where God promises things over us, and we, in our prayer times and our walk with Him, we wrestle with God and have dreams. So I'm standing in my daughter's room here, and this mural behind me is of London, of the nations of the world. She has heard God speak into her life that she will go to the nations of the world and minister the gospel into the nations of the world. And so right next to her bed, she's got this little room divider with one of the nations of the world, reminding her. There are pictures in her room here. I'm looking at the Eiffel Tower, and there are pictures of Australia and Sydney. And so I know that buried deep in her heart is this longing to walk in the promise of God. So this is the same with Abraham and his wife Sarah. She was promised children that were going to, eventually become a great nation. Now Sarah, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had this Egyptian named Hagar. Verse 2 says, "And so she said to Abraham, 'The Lord has kept me from having children. Go and sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her.' So Abraham agreed to what Sarah did." Now, when we short-circuit the promise of God or settle for our plan instead of God's plan, often it doesn't turn out so well. And so in this instance, Hagar gets, stroppy. Sarah gets jealous. They start to fight. Abraham is just like, "What are these women doing in my house?" And he throws up his hand and says to his wife, "You deal with her like you want to." And so abuse happens. And so the first thing we take from this is that we need to have faith that God will honor His word and that we'll walk in His promise and not settle for second best. If you're about to get married, don't settle for second best. If you're about to go into a business deal that you know is dodgy, don't settle for second best, because it has consequences. So now let's hop over to Hagar's side of the story, because often when we mess up, taking shortcuts, not waiting for God's plan, there's collateral damage. And Hagar was that collateral damage. There she is sitting at a well, and an angel comes up to her and says to her, "And Hagar, where have you come from? And where are you going?" And then Hagar says, "Look, I'm miserable. I've been badly treated by my mistress." And the angel says to her, "Listen, go back. I'm going to look after you, and you're going to build a great nation. And you're to call your son that you're carrying right now Ishmael." And Ishmael became the father of a great Arabic race. But you know what Ishmael means? God says you must name him Ishmael, because Ishmael means God hears. If you feel like you've been abused or that you've got the short straw, God hears. When she finishes this encounter, Hagar names God, and she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. "You are the God who sees me." Isn't this a beautiful picture? Those who are feeling downtrodden, those who are feeling beaten, God hears you, God sees you. Ishmael, the product of her pain, God hears. God looks at her directly in her wrestlings and says, "I see you." And God says that to you. Now the next chapter, Abraham is confronted by God again and says, "What's this business? Taking a shortcut, settling for what I haven't given you." So he says, "Listen, I'm going to give you a son. And this is going to be the sign of your household. You're going to circumcise him and yourself. There's going to be a bit of pain in your manhood for the men that you've been impatient to receive." And so from there on, circumcision is a sign that God has promised. And he says, "And you're going to name your son Isaac." Now, the most amazing thing is that Isaac means he laughs. And so every time Abraham called Isaac, he remembers that he laughed thinking, because the chapter 17 started with Abraham falling on his face, laughing before God, saying, can you give a man 100 years old a child? And God said, okay, I'm going to give you a child. And you're going to call him. He laughs, because don't laugh at the promises of God. Don't laugh at the enormity. I was sitting in a meeting yesterday with some of our elders, and one of the elders came up with this massive plan. And I remember thinking, I can't laugh at this, because he's trying to hear God. Don't laugh at the promises and the purposes of God.